The night's calm out here by the fire, isn't it? The kind of calm that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, or maybe waiting for you to let your guard down. I've been sitting by this campfire for years now, telling stories, some light, some dark, to whoever will listen, but every now and then a story comes up that sticks with me, one that weighs heavier than the rest. Tonight's one of those. I found this story deep in an old notebook my grandfather left behind. Pages worn thin, ink faded in places, as if it had been told and retold around fires just like this one. It's a story about a place not far from here, a spot where the woods get so thick you feel like the trees are watching. A kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It's a kind that presses against your skin, cold and thick like fog. I didn't want to share this story at first, not because it's scary, but because it feels too close, too real. But sometimes stories like this need to be told so they don't get forgotten. So, if you're brave enough, lean in a little closer. It all began one late autumn evening. The leaves had fallen from the trees, brutal carpet crunching underfoot. The sun had slipped behind the horizon, painting the sky with deep shades of purple and navy. A thin mist curled through the hollow, that deep valley tucked between two ridges, where the air always felt heavier. My friend Elias was the first to tell me about the hollow. He was a quiet guy, not prone to tall tales. "Don't go into the hollow after dark," he warned me one night. He's serious. There's something there, something old. At first, I thought he was just being dramatic. After all, who hasn't heard stories about creepy forests? But there was something in his voice, a kind of weight that didn't belong to a prank or a ghost story. One weekend, Elias and I decided to camp just outside the hollow. I wanted to see for myself what he was talking about. We set up near the edge where the trees thinned out, just enough so the campfire's glow could reach the shadows. At night the wind was still, almost unnervingly so. I sat by the fire, feeling the heat on my face, smoke drifting upward in lazy spirals. The stars were hidden behind a thick cloud cover, leaving the night almost black. Elias was silent for a while, staring into the fire, as if he could see something flickering just beneath the flames. Finally, he spoke. My grandfather used to say the hollow was alive, like it watches, waits, that doesn't like strangers. I laughed, trying to ease the tension, but his gaze didn't waver. People disappear there, you know, not all at once, little by little. The thought sent a chill down my spine despite the warmth of the fire. We sat in silence, the crackling of the flames the only sound. Then, just beyond the firelight, I caught a glimpse of movement, something shifting between the trees. I squinted, but there was nothing there, just shadows moving in the night. Still, the feeling of being watched settled in my chest like a stone. I pulled my jacket tighter and tried to shake it off. Later, when the fire had burned down to glowing embers, Elias said he was going to check the perimeter. I wasn't keen on being alone, but I didn't want to seem scared, so I stayed by the fire, listening to the soft crunch of his footsteps as he moved deeper into the dark. Minutes passed. Then a sound. Not footsteps, something softer, dragging, like something being pulled across the leaf-strewn ground. My heart hammered. I told myself it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon or a fox, but the sound didn't stop. It moved closer, slow and deliberate. I stood up, peering into the blackness beyond the firelight. Nothing. Then I heard a voice, barely a whisper, calling my name. I froze. It was Elias. I called back, but there was no answer. A cold knot formed in my stomach as I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the woods. a beam cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The dragging sound had stopped, but the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me only grew heavier. I followed Elias's footsteps, the dry leaves crunching underfoot. Every snap and rustle felt amplified, echoing through the stillness. The deeper I went, the thicker the air felt, like walking through invisible webs. Then I saw it, a lantern hanging from a low branch, its weak flame flickering though there was no breeze. The light cast long, shifting shadows that seemed to twitch at the edges of my vision. I remembered the stories Elias had told me about these lanterns, warnings, markers left by those who knew the Hollow's secrets. My hand tightened around the flashlight as I moved closer. Suddenly a shape shifted just beyond the trees, tall, thin, almost translucent in the faint light. It watched me with eyes that glowed faintly, reflecting an ancient sorrow. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. The shape began to glide toward me, no footsteps, just smooth, silent motion that felt unnatural. Panic surged as I stumbled backward, racing through the trees toward the campfire. My heart pounded loud enough to drown out every other sound. When I reached the fire, Elias sat silently, his eyes vacant. "I found the lantern," he said softly, "but I don't think I'm the same anymore." That night, neither of us slept. We left at dawn, but the Hollow didn't let us go. Sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear whispering voices among the trees, and when I close my eyes, I still see that lantern's flickering flame, burning just beyond the tree line. So, that's the story I wanted to share tonight. Some places remember you long after you leave, and some fires never truly burn out. The pine trees around this spot have stood for centuries. Their needles whisper secrets when the wind moves just right, like soft voices carried from another time. I've been drawn back here more times than I can count, each visit stirring a memory, one that's both comforting and unsettling. Tonight, I want to share a story I first heard here, deep in these woods. It's one that my grandmother told me when I was a child, a tale passed down through generations, warning of something lurking beneath the pines. She said, "If you ever hear the whispers when the forest falls silent, don't answer, just keep walking." I didn't understand back then. I thought it was just a way to keep kids from wandering too far. But after what I experienced one cold autumn evening, I know it was more than that. That night, the air was sharp and crisp, the sky a blanket of stars hidden behind thick clouds. I was camping alone, surrounded by the dense, towering pines that blocked out all but the faintest glow of the moon. The fire crackled quietly, the only sound besides the occasional rustle of branches. I sat close, wrapped in my jacket, letting the warmth settle into my bones. As the night deepened, an eerie stillness took over the forest. Even the usual night creatures seemed to hush, as if holding their breath. Then, faint at first, I heard it, soft, almost like a sigh carried on the wind, whispers. At first I thought it was the trees themselves, but the whispers grew clearer, threading through the silence like threads of cold mist. They weren't words I could understand, not quite human, but unmistakably a voice, or many voices, calling softly just beyond the firelight. I told myself it was my imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew heavier. I remembered my grandmother's warning and forced myself not to answer, just to keep still. The whispers circled around me, rising and falling like waves, drawing closer, yet never revealing their source. Suddenly, a chill swept through the clearing, snuffing the fire's flame to a dull glow. In the dim light, shadows flickered at the edges of the trees, twisting into shapes that weren't quite solid. My heart pounded, but I stayed rooted to the spot, trying to keep my breath steady. The whispers turned into a soft chant, a lullaby of sorts, ancient and sorrowful. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the earth. The last thing I saw before the fire went dark was a figure stepping from the shadows, tall, pale, and silent, with eyes that seemed to shine like stars. The figure stood still for a moment, as if studying me. Its eyes held a deep sadness, like it carried the weight of centuries. Then, slowly, it raised a hand, not threatening, but beckoning. I wanted to say something, to ask who it was, but no sound came out. The forest around us was silent, the whispers fading into the dark. I forced myself to step back, my legs shaking. As I stumbled away, the figure vanished into the shadows like smoke caught on the wind. I rushed back to where the fire had died, fumbled with the matches, and managed to reignite the flames. Warmth returned, chasing away some of the cold and fear, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. That night stretched on endlessly. Every crackle of the fire, every rustle in the trees made me jump. The whispers never returned, but the silence itself was deafening. When dawn finally broke, I packed up quickly, eager to leave the woods behind. But as I glanced back one last time, I swear I saw the pale figure standing at the tree line, watching me go. That's where the story really begins. Because after that night, strange things started happening. Things I can't explain, like voices in the wind when no one is around, and shadows that move just beyond my sight. Days passed, but the woods never left my mind. At home, I began hearing the whispers again, faint, distant, like echoes from that night. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I feel a cold breath on my neck, though no one's there. One evening, drawn by an unexplainable pull, I found myself back at the edge of the forest. The pines loomed above me, silent and dark. I stepped inside, heart pounding, searching for answers. The whispers returned, clearer now, weaving through the branches. I followed them deeper until I reached a small clearing, a place where the ground was bare, as if something had been buried there long ago. There, half buried in the dirt, was a weathered locket. I opened it to find a faded picture, a woman with eyes just like the figure from that night. Suddenly, the whispers rose to a crescendo, voices pleading, sorrowful. I felt the presence behind me again, cold but not hostile. It was then I understood. The figure was bound to the forest, trapped between worlds. And the whispers were its story, a warning to those who dared enter. I left the locket there, hoping it might bring some peace. As I walked away, the forest seemed to sigh, a soft release, like a breath finally let go. So, if you ever find yourself beneath the pines at night and hear the whispers, remember to keep walking. Don't answer. Some voices are best left unheard. There's a ridge not far from here called Hollow Ridge. It's named for the deep hollow that cuts through the woods on its slope, place locals avoid once the sun goes down. I first heard about the ridge from an old friend who grew up nearby. He told me about a cabin that sits alone at the top, abandoned for decades but somehow never forgotten. They say the cabin holds memories, echoes of the past trapped within its walls. When I finally made the trip, I wasn't sure what to expect. The hike up was steep, the trees thick with moss and shadows. The air was damp, carrying the scent of pine and earth. As I climbed, the forest grew silent. Even the birds had stopped singing. When I reached the ridge, the cabin came into view. Weathered wood, windows like dark eyes watching. The door creaked open as I stepped closer, inviting an eerie all at once. Inside, the air was cold and still. Dust danced in the beam of my flashlight. Old furniture lay covered in sheets, and faded photographs hung crooked on the walls. A journal rested on a cracked table, its pages yellowed with age. I opened it and began to read. The journal belonged to a man named Samuel, who had lived in the cabin many years ago. His words painted a picture of loneliness and loss, days spent waiting for someone who never came. He wrote of strange noises at night, whispers that drifted through the walls like a cold breeze. One entry caught my eye. It described a visitor who appeared one evening, pale and silent, standing at the edge of the ridge. Samuel said he tried to speak, but the visitor vanished before words could form. As I read, the floorboards creaked beneath me, making me jump. The cabin felt alive, as if it was listening. Outside, the wind began to howl, rattling the windows like the echoes of a distant cry. I knew then I wasn't alone. Suddenly, a shadow flickered at the edge of the room, too quick to see clearly, but enough to make my skin crawl. I shone my flashlight toward it, but it was gone. My heart raced as the whispers started again. Soft, sorrowful voices carried on the wind. I gathered the journal and decided it was time to leave. But as I turned toward the door, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from upstairs. I hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, listening to each slow step echo above me. The air grew colder, the silence thick and heavy. I gripped my flashlight tighter and began to climb. At the top, the hallway stretched out, dimly lit by moonlight seeping through a cracked window. The footsteps stopped just beyond a door at the far end. I inched closer, every nerve on edge. Slowly, I pushed the door open. Inside was an empty room, but the air felt charged, as if someone had just left. On the floor lay a worn coat, faded and frayed. I picked it up and felt a sudden chill crawl down my spine. Then a soft whisper filled the room, a name barely audible. Samuel. I dropped the coat and hurried down the stairs, not daring to look back. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying a final message. Stay away. If you ever find yourself near Hollow Ridge, remember the cabin and the man who lived there. Some places hold on to their secrets, and some voices are never truly gone. There's an old mine hidden deep in the hills, long abandoned and swallowed by nature. I heard about it from a local who said strange sounds sometimes echo from the tunnels, whispers and footsteps when no one's there. Curious, I decided to visit the site one late afternoon, just as the sun dipped low. The path was rough, overgrown with brambles and wildflowers, the air thick with the scent of earth and moss. As I neared the mine's entrance, the sky darkened, shadows stretching like fingers across the ground. The opening yawned wide and dark, a hollow maw waiting to swallow the light. I hesitated, feeling the weight of silence pressing down. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The air inside the mine was cool and damp, smelling of earth and forgotten years. My footsteps echoed softly against the rough walls as I ventured deeper. The light from my flashlight barely reached the edges of the tunnel, swallowed quickly by shadows. I could hear the faint drip of water somewhere ahead, steady and slow. Suddenly, a faint sound caught my attention, a whisper just beyond the beam of light. I froze, listening. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it seemed to be calling, pulling me further in. The walls felt like they were closing in, the silence heavier with every step. Then, a cold gust swept through the tunnel, snuffing out my flashlight. Darkness swallowed me whole. My heart hammered as I fumbled to turn the light back on. When it flickered to life, I saw faint shapes moving just beyond the glow, shadows dancing along the walls. I took a step back, my breath visible in the chill air. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm of voices. Then, a figure appeared at the tunnel's mouth, pale, translucent, eyes glowing softly. It beckoned silently, urging me to follow. I wanted to run, but my feet moved forward, drawn by something I couldn't explain. I followed the glowing figure deeper into the mine, my footsteps slow and cautious. The whispers surrounded me, echoing off the stone walls like a haunting melody. The figure led me to a small cavern, where the air felt thick and still. In the centre lay a rusted mining cart, half buried under debris and dust. As I approached, the whispers softened into a single voice, clear and urgent. It told the story of a miner trapped in the tunnels long ago, his fate forgotten by time. The spirit had been waiting, hoping someone would hear his plea and remember. I reached out, touching the cold metal of the cart, feeling a chill run through me. The cavern seemed to exhale, releasing a breath it had held for decades. The figure smiled faintly before fading into the shadows. The whispers quieted, and the mine grew silent once more. I made my way back to the entrance, the first rays of dawn breaking through the trees. Outside, the world felt alive again, but I carried the mine's echoes with me, a reminder of stories lost beneath the earth. There's a stretch of forest just beyond the ridge, dense, dark, and almost forgotten. Locals call it the Hollow Wood. I first heard about it from my grandfather, a man who rarely spoke of his past but always warned me about this place. He said that long ago a man disappeared into those woods, never to return. Some say his spirit lingers there still, watching from the shadows. I didn't believe the stories, not really, until the night I decided to see the Hollow Wood for myself. The sun was setting as I approached the edge of the forest, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. As I stepped beneath the canopy, the world seemed to shift. The light dimmed, swallowed by the thick branches overhead. The silence was profound. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the sound of my own footsteps crunching against the forest floor. I walked deeper, the trees closing in around me like silent sentinels. After a while, I came upon an old stone marker, half covered in moss. Engraving was worn, but I could make out faint letters spelling Watchman's Hollow. Curious, I traced the letters with my fingers, feeling a sudden chill crawl up my arm. From the corner of my eye, I noticed movement, a shadow slipping between the trees. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. A low whistle echoed through the woods, soft and mournful. It wasn't the wind. The feeling of being watched grew heavier, pressing down like a weight on my chest. I started walking faster, heart pounding, trying to shake the unease. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, behind me. I dared not look back. The footsteps kept pace, never faster, never slower. I broke into a run, branches whipping against my face. Suddenly, the forest opened into a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the centre stood a figure, tall, thin, and still. His face was hidden in shadow, but I felt his gaze piercing through the darkness. I froze. The figure raised a hand slowly, as if beckoning me closer. I wanted to run, but my feet refused to move. The air grew colder, and the whispers started. Voices carried on the breeze, soft and urgent. The hollow man's watch had begun. The whispers wrapped around me like a cold mist, swirling and twisting through the trees. I stood frozen in the clearing, unable to tear my eyes away from the figure's shadowed face. Then, slowly, he stepped forward, his movements fluid but unnatural, like a breeze slipping through the branches. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse with a low vibration, as if the forest itself was alive and watching. I tried to speak, but my voice was caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. The figure lifted a hand, pointing deeper into the woods. Compelled by something I couldn't resist, I followed. The forest grew darker, the trees towering like ancient giants. Branches clawed at my jacket and skin as I pushed forward. The whispers faded, replaced by a heavy silence that pressed in from all sides. The only sound was the crunch of my footsteps on the fallen leaves. Then the path opened into a narrow ravine, shrouded in fog. The air here was colder, biting through my jacket and chilling me to the bone. At the base of the ravine lay a small forgotten grave, a simple stone marker, cracked and moss-covered. I knelt beside it, brushing away years of dirt and debris. The inscription was nearly illegible, but I made out a name, Elias Gray. A shiver ran down my spine. That was the name my grandfather had whispered to me once, telling of a man lost to the hollow wood long ago. Suddenly, a soft sigh seemed to rise from the earth itself, a breath, a lament. The figure appeared beside me, silent and watching. I felt his sorrow, a weight of regret that stretched across time. The sky darkened further, clouds swallowing the moonlight. I wanted to ask who he was, why he lingered here, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, the figure reached out and touched the stone gently. The ground trembled beneath us, and the whispers returned, louder now, filled with longing and warning. I understood then. The hollow man was bound to this place, cursed to watch over the forest forever, waiting for someone to remember him. And now I was part of his watch. The weight of the hollow man's sorrow pressed against me, cold and unyielding. I rose slowly, feeling as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The figure turned and began to fade, blending into the mist like smoke drifting on the wind. Before disappearing, he whispered a single word, a plea wrapped in centuries of loneliness. Remember. I stood alone in the ravine, the silence returning thick and complete. A chill lingered in the air, a reminder that some stories never truly end. As I made my way back through the woods, the shadows seemed to shift with new meaning, watchers waiting beyond the trees. The path back was long and slow, the forest alive with unseen eyes. By the time I reached the edge of the hollow wood, dawn was breaking, painting the sky with soft pinks and golds. I've never told many people what happened that night. Part of me fears that by speaking it aloud, I might draw the hollow man's watch back to me. But the other part knows that stories are meant to be remembered, passed down like lanterns guiding the way. So here I am, sharing this with you by the firelight, hoping the tale will keep you safe should you ever wander near the hollow wood. Remember the watch, and if you hear the whispers in the trees, don't stop walking. In a small village, nestled between misty mountains and winding rivers, there's an ancient willow tree by the water's edge. Locals say it's home to a spirit, a guardian, and a warning all at once. My grandmother told me stories about the willow when I was a child, tales of a woman who once lived by the river, who vanished one night beneath the branches. They say her spirit watches over the village, appearing to those who stray too close after dark. I never believed the stories, until I experienced it myself. One evening, during the Festival of Lanterns, I wandered near the riverbank alone. The night was warm, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and incense. Lanterns floated gently on the water, their lights flickering like stars caught in the current. The willow's branches swayed softly, casting long shadows on the water's surface. Suddenly, I felt a chill brush against my skin, though there was no wind. From the corner of my eye, I saw a pale figure beneath the willow, a woman in flowing white, her face hidden behind cascading hair. She didn't speak, but her presence was heavy, filled with sorrow and longing. I wanted to approach, but found my feet rooted to the ground. The woman raised a delicate hand, pointing toward the village. A whisper, barely audible, drifted through the air, a warning in a language I barely understood. I realized then that the willow spirit was trying to tell me something important, something urgent. As I watched, she vanished into the night, leaving only the rustling of willow leaves behind. The night deepened as I stood by the riverbank, the memory of the willow spirit lingering in the air like a soft echo. The village around me was alive with laughter and music from the festival, but I felt strangely detached, as if I was caught between two worlds. I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was watching, waiting. Curious and cautious, I decided to return to the willow tree the following evening, hoping to understand the spirit's warning. The moon hung low, casting a silver glow over the rippling water. As I approached, the willow's branches swayed without wind, brushing against the surface like ghostly fingers. Suddenly, the pale figure appeared again, silent and still beneath the ancient tree. This time, her eyes met mine, filled with a sorrow so deep it echoed in my bones. She reached out, pointing beyond the river towards the forest that bordered our village. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine, but also an urgent pull to follow. The path through the forest was narrow and tangled, shadows stretching long and dark beneath the canopy. With each step, the whispers of the spirit seemed to grow louder, guiding me deeper into the woods. The air turned thick with the scent of damp earth and moss, and the sounds of the village faded into silence. Suddenly, I stumbled upon a small shrine, weathered and covered in vines, hidden among the trees. Candles flickered faintly, casting dancing shadows on stone statues worn smooth by time. I knelt before the shrine, sensing a heavy sadness in the air, a story forgotten but not gone. The Willow spirit's warning became clear, a danger lurking just beyond the village, a past that threatened to reach forward and claim the present. I stood slowly, the weight of the spirit's message settling deep inside me. The path back was quiet, the forest watching silently as I left. The next day I told the village elders about the shrine and the spirit's warning. Their faces grew pale and a heavy silence fell over the room. They spoke of an old tragedy, a flood that had swept through the village generations ago, taking lives and leaving sorrow in its wake. The Willow spirit was said to be the guardian of those lost souls, warning the living to respect the boundaries between worlds. That night, as the festival continued, I returned once more to the riverbank. The lanterns floated gently, their soft light reflecting on the water's surface. The willow's branches swayed, and beneath them stood the spirit, her face now clear, serene yet filled with sorrow. She nodded once, a silent thank you for listening. As dawn broke, the whispers faded, replaced by the gentle sounds of the village waking. I walked away, carrying the spirit's warning and a newfound respect for the delicate balance between the living and the forgotten. So if you ever find yourself near a quiet river with a willow tree standing tall, remember to listen closely. Some spirits watch not to haunt, but to protect, and sometimes their whispers carry warnings we can't afford to ignore.